Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching. Kevin stopped at the end of the gym. On the treadmill, a sultry brunette with a solid-sized 3 breasts and a tattoo on her shoulder was hard at work. Kevin slowly ran his palm over his 3-day stubble and signaled her to stop. That's enough. Let's move on to another projectile. Kevin did not let on that the girl was interested in him, and together with her went to the apparatus. For a man spoiled by women's attention, with a height of 5 feet, narrow waist, broad shoulders, and cubes on his chest, it did not escape him that the girl was also interested in him and sent him unmistakable, languorous looks. While Tracy, swaying her hips, went to the apparatus, Kevin was looking at her form with an appraising eye. He paid special attention to her long legs, her appetizing 5th point, and the hollow between her breasts. Her behavior spoke for itself. Take me, I'm all yours. Kevin considered himself a well-mannered young man and was not accustomed to refusing a lady if she insisted on continuing. At about 10 o'clock in the evening, after a tiring workout with all its consequences, Kevin sent Tracy home in a cab, and he was barely able to get to his car to go home. Wow, it's 11:30. He had to hurry so his wife wouldn't guess anything and start asking questions he couldn't answer. As he stepped out of the elevator, Kevin smelled the food coming from his apartment. Maria, I'm here. Why isn't anyone here to greet me? His wife ran out into the hallway, hugged him, kissed him gently on the cheek, and pressed herself against his chest. What took so long? I was getting worried. Maria looked at him with her trusting eyes and pouted her chubby lips resentfully. Honey, you don't know how tired I am of these fattened women who want to be as slim as a dough in one session. But for the sake of you and John, I have to put up with it and take extra workouts. He grinned and shrugged. You're the breadwinner. Maria kissed him softly on the lips. Go wash your hands, I'll feed you. And what is it smells so good? Smell of it makes me sick to my stomach and drool. Kevin asked and went to wash his hands. Kevin put the phone on the kitchen table and started dinner. Oh, not this. Kevin guessed it was Tracy sending him a message. He grabbed the phone and turned it off defiantly. They'd gotten so cocky they didn't even look at the time. I warned them not to call after 10 o'clock because I have a small child. Kevin was so sincerely indignant that he believed he was telling the truth. After a delicious dinner, Kevin drank a glass of freshly squeezed juice and leaned back in his chair, contentedly remembering everything that he and Tracy had done tonight. Kevin sighed heavily. He would give anything to be in the lounge with her again. But in the bedroom, his wife was waiting for him, who had long since stopped playing games with him. Kevin's mood immediately soured, and while his wife went to the nursery to check on her son, he grabbed his phone and started texting Tracy. In the morning, Kevin woke up to the delicious smell of scrambled eggs and bacon. He stretched out in bed, got up, did 30 push-ups from the floor, and walked out of the bedroom to find himself face to face with Maria, who was on her way to call him for breakfast. Maria's phone rang. Yes, just a minute. Let me see what time I can get you in. It's 1:20. Great. Then I'll book you in. Tracy, just Tracy. I'll see you all tomorrow for your hair coloring. When Kevin heard his lover's name, he froze with bacon in his mouth and almost spilled hot coffee on his hand. He called Tracy in the car. Hi, she murmured languidly. Miss me already? Tracy continued to purr softly. Tracy, why did you make an appointment with my wife to get your hair done? I'm asking you not to do that. He mumbled unhappily into the phone. There was silence for a while. Kevin, I didn't know it was your wife. Friend gave me the phone number of this guy. I called him on a tip. It's nothing personal. You're going to have to sign up with another guy. Kevin started to insist. Tracy thought about it for a while and spoke softly. I'd be very interested in meeting the wife of such a hot macho man. After a few seconds of thinking, Kevin angrily hung up the phone, hit the gas, and drove to work. Tracy had Kevin in her clutches. Every evening she came to the gym, and after a personal training session, squeezed all the juices out of him. Kevin came home late, moving slowly because of the traffic and a lot of traffic. He was in a great mood. Today, he and Tracy had decided to go on vacation for a week to get away from the hustle and bustle of the world and enjoy each other. He had already thought of what he would tell his wife. He would go to school for a week for her. It was unlikely that Maria would suspect him of lying, because Kevin had never given his wife any reason to doubt his infidelity. For her, he was always a good and faithful family man. Kevin grinned wryly. I should have gone to VGeek to the acting department. I would have been the best student there. It is necessary to have a certain talent. Kevin praised himself and smiled. But today Kevin was waiting for a complete fiasco at home. Maria was sitting on the sofa with a lost look and tears were rolling from her eyes. Maria, honey, what's wrong? Concerned about her condition, Kevin jumped to her. He knelt down in front of her and began to gently wipe away her tears. Tell me, sweetheart, who hurt you? I had Tracy's laminating appointment today. Her phone was on the table. She got a message from you. You consulted her on the best day to take tickets to Egypt. Maria carefully watched her husband's reaction. Honey, you've definitely got me confused with someone else. Kevin started making excuses and glancing warily at his wife. No, I didn't. Maria didn't let him finish, but interrupted him. I grabbed your mistress by the hair and threatened her. If she doesn't tell me the truth, I'll cut out a piece of her hair in the most visible place. She confessed everything, Kevin. Maria raised her eyes full of tears to her husband. Let me go. Tracy screamed. I don't have anything to do with this. Deal with your husband. He doesn't let a single skirt pass him by. I went to the gym and I saw him licking his lips at me. I didn't know he was married. Maria let go of her hair, which she'd wound around her arm in anger. You're crazy. You need treatment. Almost crying, Tracy said. You would be better to your husband, so grabbed by the hair. Maybe he would be less walking from you. Maria went home. First of all, she opened the safe and took out all the cash they had saved for the development of their business. She took John to his mother beforehand so that he would not ask any question. Maria took her time gathering all the necessary things into a suitcase and rolled it out into the hallway. When she heard the door lock rattle, she sat down on the sofa, put her leg over her leg, and waited impatiently for her husband. Maria saw Kevin's eyes widen when she told him about the conversation with his mistress, and when she told him that she almost lost her hair. Kevin choked on his own saliva and coughed as if it was happening to him. He touched his hair to make sure and calmed down when he realized that it was in place. Maria put the strap from her purse on her shoulder, took the handle of the suitcase, and slowly rolled it to the door. I'm leaving you, Kevin. I should have done it a long time ago, but I was naive and trusted you to be decent. But thanks to Tracy, she's opened my eyes to a lot of things. When you see her again, tell her I said hello and thank her for taking the rose-colored glasses off my eyes. Kevin stared at her with a blank stare, wanting to justify himself to his wife, because he had always been good at messing with her mind. But now he couldn't think of a single good idea to get out of this unpleasant story. I wonder what else Tracy could have said. She couldn't have told me that we'd tried every position in the Kama Sutra, could she? Kevin grimaced. For the first time in his life, he was suddenly disgusted and almost vomited at the memory. Maria, honey, you've got it all wrong. Kevin started talking and stammering in fear. He imagined that now his good and decent Maria would leave him. And who would he be left with? No, sorry. He was not ready to lose his wife. Kevin knelt down in front of his wife, wrapped his arms around her waist and looked into her eyes as pitifully as possible. Maria, I'm sorry. It's the first time I've had such a thing. I don't need anyone but you and John. Don't leave me. Do you want me to call this Tracy and tell her that it's over between us? I'll tell her that it's over between us. I'll tell her that I need her as a dog's fifth leg. Maria disdainfully removed his hands. Don't bother, Kevin. You don't have to make that kind of sacrifice. You'll lose your tickets to Egypt and your 5-star hotel. Kevin, you've always been good with money. I can't call you a spender. Remember how you sent me to the cottage to my mother and son every summer because we could not afford foreign trips? Kevin's heart snapped and squeezed into a ball of shame in front of his wife. Only yesterday they talked to her on this topic, and he assured her that next year they will definitely find the money for a vacation. Maria, we can't do it this year. We'll have to be patient. Kevin squeezed his eyes shut and lowered his head, remembering his words. Maria looked at him disappointedly, holding back her tears. I don't know what came over me. I treat girls like Tracy as sports equipment to be used as intended. And nothing more. And nothing more. Don't go, Maria. Please don't go. I'll make it up to you. I promise you. At least for the sake of my son. Let's try to keep the family. Maria grinned bitterly, and in order not to burst into tears and not to show her weakness, she walked around him and went out the door. I won't let you go. I'll fix everything if you want. I'll even quit this job and find another one. Kevin shouted at the whole building, grabbed her elbow and to hold her, began to pull her back into the apartment. Maria disdainfully pulled her elbow and shoved him away from her. No. She shook her head and grabbed the handle of her suitcase. Forget about the happy family we had. In our family, behind the happy mask, hid lies, deceit, and betrayal on your part. I do not want to live like that. I cannot live with a man who does not love and respect me. Maria thought a little and continued. And you know, I will definitely find a man who will love me and will not laugh behind my back. Maria brushed a tear off her cheek and looking intently at Kevin point blank, she continued. And I wish you good luck. Now you don't have to hide and wiggle around like a frying pan. You'll live the life you want, even though you've never denied yourself anything. Goodbye. I'll let you know the date of the divorce, she said, and got in the elevator. What an asshole. What an asshole. A lecherous bastard who indiscriminately sticks his junk in anything that moves. Cousin Sophia was cursing when she saw Maria with a suitcase on the doorstep. And this is a married man with a growing son. You didn't accidentally hit him with a frying pan before you left, did you? No. Maria smiled bitterly. You should have, shouted Sophia. Maria covered her face with her hands and sobbed bitterly. Calm down, Sophia said in a calmer tone, sighed and stroked her sister's head. He is not worth your tears. Tomorrow go and file the divorce papers. Maria wiped her eyes, red from tears, blew her nose, and nodded her head. Sophia, I'll stay at your place for now. I don't want to stay with my mom. Her brother and his wife live there now. I want to rent an apartment. As soon as I rent an apartment, I'll move out of your place. Well, not to kick you out on the street. Her sister said sympathetically and shook her head. Now let your Kevin bite his elbows. Where else you will find such a douchka to iron his socks and panties from both sides and put a sock in his pocket. And maybe he will even be happy to divorce. Maria said thoughtfully, looked at Sophia and smiled bitterly. Now I won't have to lie about why he was late at work and worry that I'll get into his phone, with which he never leaves. He will hire a housekeeper who will wash, iron, cook, and clean. So the housekeeper has to pay for everything, and you did everything for free. With a chuckle in her voice, commented on Maria's words, Sophia. There will be less money left for different whoremongers. She continued, Don't take offense, Maria, but it's all your own fault. You're working too much at work. And then you run to the kitchen to cook chops for Kevin. And Kevin gets tired. He takes overtime. Now you finally realize what kind of overtime he had, while you were carrying bags of groceries from the supermarket to feed Kevin better. He was practicing new poses with different fucks on the equipment. Sophia sighed heavily. Come on, I'll make you some tea. I have borscht in the fridge, but I don't even offer it. I can see that you can't eat a bite now. Maria sobbed and brushed a tear from her cheek again. You're right, Sophia. He spoiled him, looked into his mouth and blew dust off him. So he felt like Apollo. Maria said barely audibly and looked at her sister in surprise, because at that moment the front doorbell rang. Are you waiting for someone? Maria said in a frightened voice and rounded her eyes in fear. Who are you scared of? Do you think Kevin has already come for you? Don't be fooled, sister. Sophia put the mug with tea on the table and went to open the door. Maria held her breath and hid behind the curtain just in case. Maria, where are you? Come out of your hiding place. It's a neighbor brought a debt. She grabbed some money from me before the paycheck. And you hid behind the curtain. You think you cannot see. Sophia laughed heartily. I didn't even have time to think about anything. I just jumped up and hid behind the curtain out of fear. Smiling, began to justify Maria, embarrassed by her action. Who were you afraid of? What can he do to you? Do you think he will come and beg to come back? Sophia laughed again and looked at Maria judgmentally. Yes, I think he already invited Tracy and practiced new exercises on your bed, while you snot on your fist and wait for him to apologize. Sophia wrinkled her face and continued to teach her sister. I didn't like him right away. As soon as I saw him for the first time, also correct, obliging. I didn't say anything to you then. I didn't want to upset you. But I warned him that if he let his hands loose again, I'd tell you everything. I remember how his face stretched at my threats. He looked at me like I was begging, and before anyone saw him, he twisted his finger at my temple. Sophia shook her head and curled her lips disdainfully. What a nasty and unpleasant man he was. Sophia shrugged and crinkled her shoulders like a toothache. It hadn't even been 5 years, and he'd already shown his true colors. Sophia sighed and looked at her sister, who sat demurely in her chair, rubbing her fingers together. After drinking a bottle of whiskey, Kevin stared at his phone, which was on the table, ringing persistently. He was in no condition to talk to Tracy at the moment. Kevin had texted her right after Maria had left, telling her that she was the reason his wife had left him and thanking her for sticking her nose where it didn't belong and talking with her tongue wherever and whenever she could. Kevin put the phone on silent mode and barely moving his feet. Went to his son's room, stood in the doorway for a while, thinking that his son might not be in this room ever again, and Mary would not meet him on the doorstep, would not throw herself on his neck with joy. Kevin had tears in his eyes, and his heart was beating such a drumbeat. He felt so sorry for himself that he collapsed on the children's bed. He buried his face in the pillow and gritted his face in the pillow and gritted his teeth with heartache. Kevin woke up to the persistent ringing of the doorbell. Tracy stood on the doorstep smiling with all her 32 teeth. You're the last thing I need right now, Kevin thought to himself and stepped away from the door, letting her into the apartment. I had to get the address from your boss. I didn't like your mood last night. If you do anything else to yourself, we're going on vacation in 2 days. Tracy went into the hall and jumped on the couch. When she saw that Kevin didn't react to her at all, she stood up, put her arm around his shoulders, pushed him down, and they fell on the couch together. Tracy began to unzip her dress, looking flirtatiously at Kevin and licking her lips with her tongue. Tracy, I'm not in the mood today. Kevin screwed up his face and started to get up off the couch. Where did your mood go? Are you really that upset about your mentally ill wife? You should be glad she left you. You probably wouldn't have made such a desperate move yourself. Tracy slowly looked around the room. It's cozy in here, she said, taking off her dress and wearing only lace underwear. She waved her index finger at Kevin, smiling coquettishly with her charming smile. His eyes lit up at once. He picked Tracy up in his arms and carried her to the marital bedroom. Maria was calling another realtor when Sophia came into her room. Why are you running ahead of the train? You're in a hurry. I'm not chasing you. You'll divorce your Kevin, divide your movable and immovable property, buy yourself an apartment, and then you'll leave me. And now live at my place with John and I will not be bored. Maria looked at her sister with approval. Thank you, sis. Maria sighed and looked sadly at Sophia. She looked as if she was being led to the dais for the death penalty. The sound of the front doorbell interrupted their conversation. Sophia went to open the door. Get my wife. I need her right away. Without any preamble, Kevin said angrily, and started pushing Sophia out of the way to get into the apartment. Hello to you, too. I didn't invite you to visit. Sophia started to push him away and tried to close the door, but Kevin put his foot out so she couldn't slam it shut. "Where's my wife again?" He said it loud and clear. "I'm calling the police," Sophia shouted as she continued to try to close the door. "Let me go." He pushed Sophia away, went into the apartment and slammed the door behind him. Maria heard Kevin's voice and rushed to Sophia's aid. "What are you doing? What the hell kind of wife am I to you if you're going on vacation tomorrow with your mistress?" Maria screamed. "Maria, we need to talk to you urgently," Kevin said loudly, stammering in surprise. "What can we talk to you about?" She crossed her arms over her chest and leaned back against the wall, her whole body trembling with excitement, but she tried to look calm and not to show it. "Maria, what right did you have to take all the money out of the safe? Give back at least half of it." Without preamble, Kevin looked at his wife pleadingly. "Not enough money for the trip? Didn't get paid enough for overtime? You can make it up as you wish. You've already spent your half of the money. I took my half. Now get out." Maria pointed at the door. "Maria, let's talk to you alone, without strangers." He turned his head and looked defiantly at Sophia, who looked at him with undisguised contempt from head to toe. "You and I are adults, so why do we need third parties?" Kevin kept his angry gaze on Sophia, showing her that she was unnecessary. "Let's discuss our future life and find best way out of this situation," he continued talking, ignoring the laughter. "Our future life?" Maria repeated his words in surprise. "Do you know what you're saying? We are no more, Kevin, and there will never be any more. There is you, your work, your girls with whom you hold master classes, and I am not in your life and never was." Maria smiled sadly and sighed heavily. "Maria, if you now tell me to refuse a trip to Egypt, I'll throw away the ticket and stay home with you. Your peace of mind and the health of my son are more important to me than anything else." Kevin went on with his prepared speech, justifying himself and his actions. "Do you really think that I would trade you and my son for some other woman who would jump into my bed at the first call?" Kevin wrinkled his face and clenched his hands into fists. "It's even funny." Looking at his wife with a guilty look, he continued his speech. "Why do you need money if you're not going to Egypt?" Sophia asked with a sneer. "You're the only one who is missing here with your stupid questions." Kevin thought to himself and turned his gaze to her. "Sophia, can I talk to my wife?" Sophia raised her eyebrows in surprise, shook her head, and continued. "Marie should have left you a long time ago. Maybe long ago forgot you and would not remember as a terrible dream. Or did you decide to take your wife to rest with you instead of a mistress?" Kevin did not expect such a question and began to frantically search for all kinds of solutions in his head. Going on vacation with his wife wouldn't be desirable, of course. You can't relax with Maria like you can with Tracy. And Tracy won't give up her vacation. She sleeps and sees herself in Egypt. "I'd love to go with you, Maria." He began to speak uncertainly, carefully choosing words, thinking how to get out of this situation. "But airplane tickets are non-refundable. You can't change them." He smiled guiltily and pressed his lips together in a tight line. Sophia laughed and clapped her hand on her leg, which was to be expected. "I was checking you out, Kevin, and you didn't pass, of course." "Maria, should I stay or should I go?" She asked her sister a question, ignoring Kevin. "Sophia, don't go. I have nothing else to talk to him about." "What do you mean there's nothing else to talk about? Have you lost your mind, Maria? We have a family, a child, if you've remembered." "What? You're going to ruin it all over one ridiculous affair. Have you thought about your son?" Maria watched her husband's frustration and wondered how she hadn't noticed his insolence and endless lies before. Maria laughed and clapped her hands together. "Kevin, I always told you that you chose the wrong profession. You would have made a great artist if you had entered the theater. Go away, Kevin. I've filed for divorce." "You're about to get a subpoena." Kevin's face changed immediately, red as a tomato, his eyes rounded, a vein of anger rising above his eyebrow. "You filed for divorce. Are you all right in the head? Did your little sister put you up to this? She's living without a man, and she's setting you up, and you're all ears." She filed for divorce. Kevin mocked her. You couldn't think of anything cleverer. He stared at Maria and watched her every gesture, trying to understand her mood for the future. He noted to himself that she had turned from soft and docile to rebellious, thanks to that crazy sister who was turning Maria against me. "Maria, let's go home. I miss you." He said it as softly and gently as he could and made a guilty face. "That's out of the question." Maria replied nonchalantly, "Go away, Kevin. If I leave, you promise to think about my proposal." I promise. Maria answered to get him out of the apartment. She made a disgruntled face and pointed to the door. "Maria, I'm counting on your discretion and feminine wisdom." Looking into her eyes and wanting to see sympathy in them, Kevin said, "Everyone can make mistakes." He said goodbye and left the apartment. Kevin understood that such a woman as his wife would not be alone for long. During these few days that Maria was away, the apartment had turned into a real mess. His dirty socks were lying in all corners. His clothes were also scattered all over the house. There were no clean mugs and plates left. Beer and whiskey bottles were lying everywhere. Nothing. Nowhere you will not get away from me, dear. You will crawl home like a sweetheart. Now a little more blow. Such men like me on the road are not lying. Kevin was thinking on the couch. If anything, I'm not easy too. If they find out that I'm divorced, I'll have a queue of girls lined up. I'll have to dig and choose. Kevin imagined the line and smiled. Well, if Maria is not a complete fool, then she will come back. But if not, then I will not put my brains in her. Let her bite her elbows. The doorbell rang. "Hi." Tracy came into the apartment and kissed him gently on the cheek. "What are our plans for tonight?" she asked Kevin, jumping up on the couch. "I suggest we go out, have a bite to eat, pass the time, and then continue on to your bedroom." With a flirtatious wink of one eye, Tracy smiled and stretched out on the couch like a cat. "Maybe you could start by doing the dishes and sweeping up the sand on the doorstep." Kevin answered her in a disapproving tone. "Oh, Kevin, you're so mercenary. Call a cleaning service and all your issues will be resolved." Yeah, Kevin thought to himself. It's like I make millions to use a cleaning service. That's what my wife's always done. What a bitch. She's all over me and now I'm not right for her. As he closed the door behind Tracy, Kevin began to lament and berate her. "You're an asshole." He grinned, mocking Tracy, wrinkling his forehead and covering his eyes. "Why are you so hung up on this asshole? You went to my wife. She's the one who asked for her. She's ruined everything. She's a nasty girl. Wherever she goes, she leaves ashes behind her. I also paid for her trip to Egypt. Asshole. How many times I vowed not to get involved with underage girls who have no idea what's in their heads. No, you've got her confused again. You little pussy." Kevin couldn't calm down and he was cursing at Tracy. "You're a total zero." Again he remembered Tracy's words and snorted at the injustice. "I wish you'd look at yourself. She's a log, but she's a beauty queen. A beauty queen. I should be thinking about my wife and how to get her home. Tracy's got no bones in her mouth. Why dwell on a woman who's been wronged? I'm sure a little push, a couple of romances, and her heart will shake. Maria will not be able to resist my pressure." Kevin calmed himself, already thinking through some options. Kevin bought a large bouquet of red roses at the flower store, drove to Sophia's house, and parked the car right outside the entrance. She should be home from work in about 20 minutes. Kevin thought, looking at the windows of the third floor of his sister's apartment. Kevin chased away the thought that his legal wife might have fallen out of love with him in such a short time and found a replacement. He consoled himself with the fact that Maria had always been a faithful wife, and because of her character, would not be able to have an affair while still married. During these few days, Kevin had time to rethink his attitude to his wife and realized that he could not find someone like Maria. On the one hand, Kevin found positive aspects in his wife's departure. No more lying and dodging about his absence from home. But on the other hand, is it possible nowadays to find a wife who, despite the shortcomings of her husband, faithfully looks into the eyes, shows care and love, and completely dissolves in his other half? No, there are no flaws in my Mary. Kevin thought with his hands on the steering wheel and looked around, hoping to see his wife and son. Kevin rehearsed again and again the words he would say to Marie when he met her. Phone rang. Kevin looked at the screen, made a sour face, but picked it up. Did you miss me? Tracy greeted him cheerfully. Are you thinking of flying to the pyramids with me tomorrow? Tracy made a small pause, but without waiting for an answer, continued. Actually, what I'm calling. I decided to write a report on you about rape, or more precisely violent actions of sexual character. Kevin furrowed his eyebrows as he listened to her babble and shook his head in confusion, as if he'd heard something incomprehensible and supernatural. Are you all right in the head? There's no place to brand you and you're accusing me of something? Kevin's forehead was sweating, and he clutched his head and swore out loud. What more do you want from me? He continued angrily, shouting, Money! Tracy answered calmly. I thought you'd come with me and take me on your full support. But since I'm going alone, I need a lot of money to have a good vacation and not deny myself anything. Kevin knew that she was bluffing, but with a good deal of money, he could go to jail. That's all I need. Kevin grimaced and slammed his hands on the steering wheel. Thank God she's of legal age. He cursed to himself as he thought of all the ways out of this ridiculous situation. The fact that she was with me was seen by everyone at the gym. She can find witnesses easily, and maybe I'll win the case, but she'll get on my nerves. How much money do you want? Stuttering at her insolence, Kevin asked in a disgruntled tone. $5,000. I don't ask for much. It's moral damages for babysitting you all this time. Believe me, it's a small amount compared to what I had to listen to from you. Tracy started laughing, and her laughter made Kevin's eyes darken. He swallowed nervously and gritted his teeth in anger. Kevin, the money is needed today, Tracy said calmly. You realize that I'm leaving tomorrow, and a spoonful is a spoonful. Kevin began to run through the names of people he knew who could get the money, and he settled on his wife. I'll explain everything to her honestly. She should understand and forgive me. Kevin immediately pulled himself together and calmed down, praising himself for quickly finding a way out of the problem. You'll get your money, Kevin replied in a disgruntled tone and pressed the disconnect button. Kevin saw Maria. He jumped out of the car, took the bouquet in his hands, and headed towards her. Maria, hi. He handed her the flowers and smiled guiltily. Maria, I'm here on business. We need to talk urgently. Kevin started talking without any preamble. Maria rounded her eyes and made a frightened face and answered, What's wrong with you again, Kevin? Maria, don't get me wrong. I need money. $5,000. Pronto. And why did you come to me in the first place? Maria had a question mark on her face and a look of total indifference. Who else would I turn to if not my own wife? Kevin lowered his eyes in shame and made an unhappy face. Kevin, don't even think about it. You won't get the money. You've been stealing from me and my son all this time, and now you're going to steal the rest of the money I've taken. I'm sorry, but you're on your own, and I still have a son to raise. I don't have extra money for your toys. Categorically answered Maria, turned around, and without saying goodbye went into the building. Kevin remained standing on the street and looked at the door, behind which his wife had disappeared a few minutes ago. Maria stood at the window and watched Kevin. Why doesn't he leave? Is he still hoping for something? Does he think I'm a complete fool who is madly in love with him and would do anything for him? Sophia appeared on the horizon, leading John by the hand. They had agreed this morning that Sophia would finally take him away from his mother. Maria missed her son and was looking forward to seeing John. She watched slowly as they approached Kevin, who who opened the side window and smoked in the car, carelessly shaking the ashes out into the street. Now he's going to start feeling sorry for her. You can't tell a kid that his dad is full of shit and that it's better to stay away from him and have nothing to do with him. Sophia thought to herself and grabbed the keys to the apartment and ran downstairs. As soon as Kevin saw his son, he jumped out of the car and ran to him. "Daddy, Daddy." "John," exclaimed joyfully and jerked in his direction. But Sophia held his nephew's hand tightly and did not let go. Kevin jumped to his son, grabbed him in his arms, and held him tightly to his chest. "Hi, son. I missed you, John. Did you miss your daddy?" Kevin looked down at his son's face. John shook his head and hugged his father tightly around the neck. "John, let's go home. Mom is waiting for us. She missed you so much." John turned his head to Sophia and only opened his mouth to answer, but saw Maria, who ran out of the building and stretched out her arms to her son. John immediately starts kicking to be released by his father, and all his attention turns to Maria. He jumps into his mother's arms and hugs her tightly around the neck. Maria kisses her son first on one cheek, then on the other, begins to twirl him around, and only then puts him on the ground. "Let's go home," she says with a satisfied smile, and takes John's hand. John doesn't think long and takes his father's hand with his other hand. "Daddy's not coming with us, John. Daddy will come to you later," Maria says affectionately, but she looks at Kevin and shows him to leave with her eyes. But Kevin pretends not to notice his wife's hints and confidently pulls his son to the driveway. "Kevin, where are you going?" "We've already talked to you and made up our minds. Let's not get into it in front of the baby." She looks at him with a disapproving tone, sparks shooting from her eyes. "Maria, I miss my son too. Why do you have to decide everything for us? You see how happy John is to see me, and you want to deprive him of that joy." Kevin looked at Maria with the eyes of a battered dog looking for protection from its master, then slowly turned his gaze to Sophia. "Sophia, please tell your sister not to throw words around, but to think with her own head. It's easy to ruin everything. Look at your sister." He turned to Maria. "She's a year older than you and she's alone. You think it's easy to live alone? No husband, no kids." Kevin knelt down on his knees in front of Maria. The presence of a big puddle outside the building and two old ladies staring at them did not embarrass him. "Mary, dear, forgive me for being a fool." Kevin started wailing. "Maria, take your artist to the apartment," Sophia said grudgingly and opened the door with the intercom key. "The neighbors are already staring at us, so let's not give them something to talk about." "What an insolent and shameless man you are," Maria lamented after listening to her husband's heartwarming story. She widened her eyes and stammered and asked again, "So you want me to give you the money, which diligently saved to rent a separate room and open a salon?" "Maria, but I also gave you my entire paycheck." Kevin sighed and sighed resentfully. "Now I understand where our money went. Behind my back, no Tracy, I think, is twiddling her thumbs and pointing at me. It's scary to imagine how many like Tracy walking around the city and laughing at me." Maria wrinkled her face and looked angrily at her husband, who was sitting quietly at the dining table with his head down in shame. "Maria, I'm already worried about him bringing us some kind of disease. If he leaves, we'll have to disinfect everything thoroughly. I don't know what's going on." Sophia contributed to the conversation and gave him a squeamish look from head to toe. "Maria, help me out one last time." Stuttering and pausing between words, Kevin began to speak. "Please give me the $5,000. I'll give it to Tracy and get a receipt from her that she won't blackmail me anymore." Kevin paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "It would be a good lesson to me, and I'll never get another woman again." He raised his head and looked at his wife pleadingly. "I won't even think about it." Maria answered, "Even if you go to jail, I'll be glad. Sit. Think." Maybe make the appropriate conclusions. And if not, God will judge you. So you won't give me any money? Kevin asked, sighing heavily and rising from his chair, and looked at Maria point blank. No, she answered and shrugged her shoulders for credibility. Is that your last word? Squinting his eyes and pressing his lips together, Kevin asked again. Yes. Yes, Maria answered briefly. He grinned, threw a crumpled napkin on the table, and without saying goodbye, walked toward the front door. He turned his head sharply, looked angrily at Sophia, turned his gaze to Maria, and smiled sourly. You'll regret it. Get ready for war. In a few days, there was almost nothing left of the lustrous and cheerful Kevin. The excitement was gone from his eyes, a deep sadness was reflected on his face, and he was completely apathetic to the world around him. All my troubles started as soon as I met that little girl. Kevin closed his eyes and crinkled his teeth as if from a toothache, remembering how Tracy had threatened him, and to put it mildly, threatened him with the sky in a cage. There is nothing sacred in today's youth. She had fun and made money. Kevin was indignant when he dialed her number. Hello, darling, Tracy answered affectionately, and from this voice, Kevin was shaken as if by an electric shock. He could not answer her in the same way, but Kevin did answer, gathering all his will in a fist. We should get together, he mumbled angrily. Did you bring the money? Tracy asked, and Kevin realized from her voice that she couldn't contain her laughter. Go outside, I'm standing under your window, Kevin said quickly and dropped the call. She's going to come out and shine like a polished samovar. Kevin had gone to his friend's house and borrowed money from him before he came to see her. And now he was using the last words he had to say about his ex-lover. She's a little slut. I knew in my heart that I'd get in trouble with her. I fell for a beautiful shell, and now I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I hope you're smart enough to keep your mouth shut. Kevin sighed and pulled a piece of paper and a pen out of the glove compartment. What's that for? Tracy asked in a disgruntled tone and looked at Kevin with wide-open eyes. It's a receipt where you tell me that you won't bother me with your crazy ideas. Right. Name me. When the receipt was ready, Kevin gave Tracy the money. Thanks, Kevin. You're not thinking of flying with me tomorrow. She waved the bucks in his face. Otherwise, let's go have some grown-up fun together. She flirtatiously suggested it while she watched his reaction. No, Kevin said hesitantly, biting his lip, but then he pulled himself together and said firmly, Come on out. I don't have time for demagoguery. I've got a lot to do, and I'd like to never cross paths with you again. Never say never, Kevin. Tracy laughed and got out of the car. Maria got off work and decided to walk a little bit to the daycare center. And John's dad took him. What do you mean, Dad took him? Maria rounded her eyes in surprise. The teacher slammed her eyelashes and began to explain excitedly. When your husband came into the locker room, John threw himself on his neck and screamed, Daddy, I had no idea not to give him the baby. Why didn't you call me? How could you give him the baby? I can't believe it. Shouting at the teacher, Maria. Well, you should have warned us first of all, who can and who can't take the child. The teacher, whose eyes were running and hands were trembling from fear, began to justify herself. Remember, what did he say to John? Where did he take him? Maria grabbed the teacher's elbow and stared at her. He was talking about some amusement park. Maria took out her phone and started frantically searching her contacts for her husband's number. She prayed to herself and clenched her hands into fists. She dialed her husband's number several times, then texted him several more times, but Kevin didn't answer. I'm going to the police to file a missing persons report. Maria texted him. A minute later, her phone rang, and the incoming call was from Kevin. Where's John? Why did you take him out of daycare? Who asked you to? Maria shouted into the phone, not remembering herself from rage. Maria, what are you doing? Kevin laughed. Don't forget that John is my son. And if anything, I have the same rights to him as you do. We're taking him for a walk, feeding the ducks, going on the Ferris wheel now. I didn't call you to distract you from important things. I wanted to spend time with my son. You said yourself that I don't spend enough time with him, so I decided to make up for it. Please bring him to Sophia right now. I'll be waiting for you on the bench near the entrance," Maria begged Kevin tearfully. "Stop making a big deal out of it." Kevin laughed. "Son, tell your mom not to worry. We haven't been on the swings yet, and we haven't ridden the steam train." The phone rang with John's happy voice. "Mom, we're going to go out with Daddy for a little while." "John, son." But Maria didn't have time to finish. "You, Maria, go home. I love him and I miss him. I'll bring him home later." Kevin hit reset. Maria wiped her tears, took a deep breath. "Try not to bring him back. I'll smash you against the wall." Maria sat on the bench outside the building and waited for Kevin to bring her son. She mentally raised her hands to the sky and prayed. Maria didn't even notice her sister, who came and sat next to her. "Sis, why are you sitting here? Where's John?" She turned her head and looked carefully at the playground. But not seeing her nephew, Sophia looked around and slowly looked at her sister. "Why are you so pale? What's wrong? Where's John?" Sophia asked her questions and looked at her sister carefully, not understanding what was happening to her. "Maria, please don't be silent. Say something." Sophia started to shake her by the shoulders. Kevin took John from the garden, and now they are walking with him. They have a cultural program. Maria squeezed out of herself and began to wipe away the tears that rolled down her cheeks. "What asshole!" Sophia scolded angrily. "Does he think he can get you back with these methods?" Maria covered her face with her hands and cried, "Sophia, say something. Calm me down. Do you think he'll give me my son back?" Sophia calmed her sister down for a long time. She gave various examples and arguments so that Maria didn't get herself worked up. "It's too early to be alarmed. John's with his own father. He's not going to hurt him. Kevin loves him. He's his own blood." She mentally spat over her left shoulder and knocked on the wooden bench to prevent a disaster. "Maria, look, Kevin's car." Sophia grabbed her sister's elbow, and they walked together to meet the car coming into the yard. Kevin parked the car slowly, unlocked the doors, rolled down the window on his side, and smiled. Maria opened the back door, and John happily fell right into her arms. "Mom, Dad, and I fed the ducks. I fed them a whole bun." John was talking excitedly, and we rode on the big wheel. I was scared, but I didn't cry. I'm a man, and men don't cry. Maria listened to his son's story with a smile, gently stroked his head, and occasionally moved her gaze to Kevin. "Well done." Swallowing a lump in her throat, she barely managed to squeeze out of herself, "Maria, why are you so pale? Have you been crying?" Kevin asked her in surprise and stared into her tear-stained face. He stepped out, leaned on the hood of the car, put his hands in his pockets, and shook his head. "So, that's what you think of me?" He grinned and shrugged. "And I've lived with this woman for 5 years. Could you really think?" But Maria didn't pay attention to Kevin anymore. All her attention was focused on her son, who was jumping around near his father and telling his mom where they were with his dad and how delicious cotton candy was. Kevin was watching Maria's reaction with the look of a victorious warrior, crossing his arms on his chest. Kevin thought to himself, not taking his eyes off his wife, and reluctantly shifted his gaze to Sophia, who was watching him with undisguised disgust. Their gazes met. "We must come up with a plan to eliminate this megastar." He grinned wryly at Sophia and winked playfully with one eye. But she rolled her eyes and turned away from him defiantly. "Thank you, Kevin, for making John's day. But please be sure to let me know if you're picking up the kid from daycare. Can you imagine how I feel when I go to pick up my kid and he's gone? Considering you've never done this before." Maria picked John up in her arms. "Say goodbye to Daddy, son. We have to go home. You need to be fed, bathed. You don't have to feed him." We ordered pizza at the pizzeria, and he ate 2 slices. Kevin interrupted her, smiled and waved goodbye to his son. Maria opened her mouth and looked at her husband incredulously. "What happened to you, Kevin? Why such a change in attitude towards her son? I don't recognize you." She shook her head as if she were not Kevin, but some alien creature that fulfills their son's every whim. I hope you haven't changed your mind about the divorce, Sophia asked her sister as they went to bed late at night. Of course not. Maria grinned and thought about it. I feel sorry for John, though, because he loves his deadbeat dad. Maria sighed heavily. Come on, Sophia. Let's go to sleep. I have to get up early tomorrow. My eyes are closing. Her head was spinning like a seesaw, thoughts that kept her awake. It will be necessary to explain to John why Daddy will live apart from them. Good that Sophia does not strain and allowed to live with her. At least do not have to spend money on rented housing. After the divorce, probably I can buy a small apartment, but I will have to take a loan. The mortgage is unlikely to approve me. Buy an apartment in my neighborhood so that the garden does not change. John just got used to the children and teachers. With pleasure goes to the group. Maria took a deep breath. It's okay. I'm not the first one to divorce my husband. I will work plus alimony Kevin will pay. We will not starve. Maria suddenly became afraid of his thoughts. She wiped away her tears with her hand. God help me, please, she whispered quietly with her lips and looked at her son sleeping sweetly next to her. Divorce, alimony, moving, court. What scary words. I never thought I would say them out loud and be alone to raise a child who was born in love and full harmony. Maria remembered how happy and proud Kevin was that he would have a son. Named him after his grandfather, whom he loved and respected very much. It was like a chainsaw went through my heart, cutting it into two halves, not giving a chance to cure it. I think my sudden departure is comparable for Kevin to the fact that at home at the same time, out of order all appliances. Iron vacuum cleaner, electric stove. Maria again looked at her son, covered him with a blanket, and gently stroked his head with her hand. Nothing, son. We will get through it. Everything will be fine with you, and even better than it was. I will try to do everything for you so that you do not need anything. Kevin opened the mailbox. Right in his hands fell out a summons to the court. Crinkling his lips, he began to read the form. He walked home on wobbly legs and looked around the apartment disappointedly. The empty closet caught his eye, and he looked at John's toys. He looked at the old shoes that were peacefully waiting for their turn in the trash with glassy, tear-stained eyes. In his head, he immediately turned on the calculator. How much money he had spent on this Tracy. You could not only buy new shoes for Marie, with this money you could completely update her closet. How Kevin wanted to turn back the clock and become a model family man. No more cheating on his wife. Cut all his mistresses out of his life and start over. What an asshole I am. Sighing, Kevin regretfully said to himself, looking at his reflection in the mirrored doors of the closet. He ran his hand through his short-cropped hair, looked at the 3-day stubble on his face. No, Maria, I'm not ready to let you go yet, don't even hope. This house needs a mistress. He looked at his reflection in the mirror again from all sides. If I were a woman, I would have married him without thinking. Kevin grinned, satisfied with his words. Kevin had always thought of Maria as a silly girl who could see nothing beyond her nose except pots and pans. Now she had grown up in his eyes into a stubborn woman who stood firmly on her feet and did not snub. Kevin was determined to bring his wife and son home using all his tricks and manly wiles. Sitting in the car, he rehearsed the speech he would give his wife when he met her. He was distracted by a knock on the front window from his side. What has our mass entertainer come up with this time? With a smirk spoke Sophia, making a surprised face. Where are the flowers? He gave 2 bouquets and decided that was enough. She continued her speech, trying to bite him harder. Sophia, go where you're going. No one's been waiting for you for a long time. Men shy away from someone like you like an evil force. I'd think about it and draw conclusions, not turn Maria against me. Kevin grinned sourly and gave Sophia a cold, haughty look. At that moment, he saw Maria walking toward the car, holding John's hand. Kevin grabbed the summons and jumped out of the car. "Dad?" Kevin squatted down and held his son close to him. John closed his eyes and hugged his father's neck with childish naivety. "Where are you taking me today?" he asked his father and turned his head to get Maria's approval. "Son, I need to talk to my mom today. We'll go to the park some other time. Go home with Aunt Sophia. Mom and I have a very important matter to settle." "What's that?" Kevin stared at Maria angrily as the door slammed behind his son. "It's a subpoena. I told you I was fine for divorce," Kevin shrugged and calmly explained. "Maria, let's settle things like adults. Why rush? Give me a chance. And you yourself will realize that I realized all my mistakes and made the appropriate conclusions. Do not cut off the shoulder." With a guilty look, he stretched out his hands, took her by the shoulders, and looked fondly into her eyes. Maria pulled his hands away. She grinned bitterly at his smooth-shaven face. "That's out of the question, Kevin." Upset by his wife's categorical answer, Kevin drove to work, angry at the world around him. "Damn you, Maria." Kevin swore in the car and tapped his hand on the steering wheel in frustration. "That's enough. I'm sick of being a good husband. No one would appreciate it anyway. I need to relax a little. After all, I have every right to do that." Kevin calmed himself, driving into the parking lot near the sports complex. At the reception, swaying her hips, a sultry brunette came up to him, shooting her eyes at his broad chest, cubes on his stomach, and what is located a little below. "Kevin, are you leaving already?" "You're wrong. I just got here." Looking at her with an appraising look from head to toe, Kevin answered, and with the look of a man who knows his own value, he walked casually into the locker room. "I can't believe how insensitive people are." Calling early in the morning, Kevin swore through his sleep, and with his eyes closed, he fumbled for the phone on the nightstand. "Kevin, why aren't you answering the phone? I've been trying to call you all morning." He heard his wife's voice and cringed with a headache. He opened his eyes and looked at the clock. 12:45. Then he looked at the brunette who was sleeping peacefully beside him. Shit. Kevin cursed out loud and immediately grabbed his temples. "What happened last night?" "Kevin, you can help me out today and pick up John from kindergarten. It's just that my client is going on vacation and tearfully asked me to do hair coloring and cutting. And Sophia's going to a friend's anniversary party." "What anniversary, Maria?" Kevin could barely get a headache out of his mouth. "What are you listening to?" "I'm talking to you," Maria replied in an aggrieved tone. "Can you pick up John today?" Kevin got out of bed and ran his fingers through his hair. His temples ached so badly that hitting his head with a hammer would be a lot easier than enduring the abuse he'd taken this morning. Kevin tripped over an empty whiskey bottle, stepped on lacy underwear, kicked a dress that was in the way, and cursed. He made his way to the kitchen, poured a glass of water from the tap, and drank it greedily. "What are you saying, Maria?" he asked his wife, trying to understand what she wanted from him. "I'm asking you. Can you pick up the kid from kindergarten tonight? Take him for a walk until I'm free?" Losing her temper, Maria repeated for the third time. "Sure, honey, I'll do whatever you want." Kevin looked at the naked girl who had left the bedroom and put his index finger to his lips, signaling her to be silent. But the girl ignored his signs and asked loudly, "Is there cold water in the fridge? Are you thirsty?" "Kevin, are you busy? Did I call it a bad time?" After some thought, asked Maria. "Maria, are you out of your mind? There's a movie on TV. Don't you have anything better to do?" Kevin continued to grumble into the phone. Having finished the conversation, he sat down on the sofa and, looking at the naked girl walking around the apartment, tried to remember the events of last night. In his head, there were pictures of him making love with this brunette right in the elevator. How she flirted with him at the gym, and then they decided to go to the sauna together. The memory of what they did in the sauna made Kevin's cheeks flush, his ears fall off, and his hair almost fall off. I promised myself I'd never fall for those pumped Of asses and stupid painted heads again. Kevin scolded himself with his last words and glanced at the girl who, without shame and conscience, was sprawled out on the couch in her mother's clothes. Come on, get up and go home. I have to pick up my kid from daycare soon. Kevin shook her shoulder. She didn't react. You're deaf. Get up. The girl slowly looked at Kevin, smiled coquettishly. Kevin stared at her silicone breasts, looked at her tanned and firm body, but remembered his promise to his wife to pick up his son. He quickly pulled himself together and turned away. What time is it? Kevin, instead of answering, dialed the cab number and ordered a car. The cab will be here in 10 minutes, Kevin shouted carelessly through her address. He grumbled unhappily. At 5 o'clock in the evening, Kevin took his son from kindergarten, and they went to the park to fulfill the planned cultural program. In the evening, satisfied John delightedly told Mary how much fun they had with his daddy, and what the best daddy he has. The judge ruled they were given a month to reconcile. The delay may cool down the emotions of the spouses, as the defendant intends to restore the relationship, and the plaintiff has no serious arguments for separation from her husband. Satisfied, Maria looked unhappily at her husband, who shone like a polished copper nickel. You ask. Of course he is. You think only of yourself. A man has made a mistake, he repents. He's sorry for what he did. Why get a divorce? You need a ride? Kevin opened the front door and gave her a gentle nudge into the car. Get in, get in, get in. Don't be silly. Kevin smiled when he saw that Maria was a little confused and didn't know what to do. I'll just give you a friendly ride. We're not strangers to each other, Kevin said as friendly as possible and closed the door behind Maria. A minute later, they were driving through the streets of the city and talking about distracting topics. Wait, where are you taking me? Suddenly, Maria frowned and looked at Kevin. Kevin did not take his eyes off the road, shrugged his shoulders and calmly said, What do you mean, where? Did you forget the way home? I thought I'd remind you. We need to talk quietly and without strangers. At work, you have clients and colleagues. At home, Sophia, who always comes in with her jokes and unnecessary advice. I just want to talk to you in a quiet environment so that no one interferes with us. All right. Maria sighed and stared out the side window. Then I'll take some of John's things and toys, she said thoughtfully and smiled slightly. Maria entered the apartment. Her nose was immediately struck by the unfamiliar smell of expensive female perfume. The smell and the recent presence of another woman in the apartment she sensed immediately, but modestly kept silent. She went into the kitchen, looked around it. She went into the children's room and began to put in a bag his favorite cars, which he often remembered and regretted that he left them at home. You see, Maria, you are not here, and there is no comfort and warmth in the house. Sometimes I don't even want to come back here knowing that you and your son are not home. Kevin looked into her eyes as if he was looking for sympathy and understanding. He took her hands and pressed them to his chest. Let's go talk. You've calmed down a little bit, cooled off. Maybe we can find a mutual solution that will suit you and me. Maria carefully released her arms from his embrace and sighed heavily. Kevin, I've made up my mind. I'm not going to change my mind. Don't get your hopes up. She picked up the broken baby car and carried it to the trash can. When she opened the lid, she saw empty whiskey bottles, 2 used contraceptives for safe sex, and a torn red thong. You miss your wife and son pretty well. She snorted in disgust and threw the lid down. Kevin closed his eyes, mentally sent himself away, and slapped his hand to his forehead. What an asshole. How could I forget to put the trash in the container this morning? It's not mine. Kevin was outraged and began to think up an excuse. Don't bother making excuses. I don't believe a word you say. Maria waved her hand and hurried out of the kitchen. She sat down on the sofa, wrinkled her face, and said in a disgruntled tone, I'm listening to you carefully. Everything Kevin had wanted to say had slipped out of his mind. He was looking for an excuse for his actions, but he didn't know what to say or how to get out of the situation. Christopher came to visit me yesterday. Kevin picked up a tattered cardboard card that John had made with his own hands in the garden. How did it get here? He asked himself a question and couldn't find an answer. His mind was all jumbled up. His thoughts were jumping from side to side, but not a single worthwhile excuse was in his head. Kevin panted like a steam engine and angrily plopped down on the chair next to him. He slapped his hand on the armrest and looked at Mariah with glassy eyes. That's the kind of shit I am. Gesticulating vigorously with his hands, he began to justify himself. Maria gave him a cold stare and grinned again. It's good that you realize that. They were both silent, studying each other with penetrating stares and thinking about their own things. I have to go to work. I have a client coming in for a haircut. Maria stood up abruptly and grabbed a bag of toys for her son. You won't even talk to me. You're so disgusted with me. Kevin squinted his eyes and continued to glare at Maria with his guilty look. The next minute he jumped up from his chair and blocked Maria's way. I won't let you in. He shouted and shook his head a few more times for credibility. Kiss me, then I'll think about it. Are you crazy? I'm not going to kiss you. Don't even dream about it. Kevin got close to his wife. Maria, I'm so sorry. He heard his own hoarse voice and choked on his words. Please. He wheezed in her ear and pressed himself even tighter against her. Kevin, stop this whole concert. Maria gathered all her strength and pushed him away from her. Kevin took a step back, still staring into her eyes and watching her reaction. No, this isn't funny. Maria wailed and looked at her watch. I'm late. I really am. Kevin, I'll drive you. Kevin replied in a tone of defiance and began to put on his shoes. Thank you. Kevin drove her to work. He was in a bad mood. He kept thinking about the trash can and the surprised eyes. It's over, Kevin said out loud, cursing himself with his last words. I've been cleaning all morning and I'm still screwed. Kevin hit the steering wheel with all his might, not watching the road. When he looked up, his car was speeding down the highway. He was swerving into the oncoming lane, where a huge truck was speeding by. On the slippery road, no one could slow down or swerve. Kevin closed his eyes and fell into darkness. Good evening. Maria, please come to the surgical ward of the regional hospital. Your husband was in a car accident. How he got into an accident. Maria's scissors fell out of her hands in surprise. She opened her mouth but could not utter a single word. She stood there for some time without moving and staring stupidly at the phone screen. Okay, I'll be right there. Maria barely squeezed out of herself and wiped a tear that rolled out. Maria sank into a chair and stared at one point with a blank stare, trying to stop the trembling in her hands. Her whole life ran before her eyes in a few minutes, and all the plans were broken. Girl, stop. Who are you here to see? Visitors' hours are 3. 0 p.m. You know, I got a call that my husband had been in an accident. They asked me to come to the surgical ward. The woman in a white coat looked at Maria, shifted her eyebrows, and shook her head unhappily. Put on a robe, shoes and a basket take, and go up to the second floor. Maria, my name is Paul. Kevin and I have been in the same gym for a long time. He has a compound fracture in his right leg, a concussion, 2 broken ribs, and a lot of soft tissue bruising. We've done everything we can, but we're not unlimited. We don't know how the bones will heal. We may have to do a second surgery and break the leg again. Asked me to call you and let you know where he is. Thank you very much, doctor. Her hands were shaking, her head was shaking, and one thought was on her tongue. Kevin would be fine. He's a lucky man. I believe in him. Maria, on woozy legs, walked out into the hallway. She sat on a bench against the wall and closed her eyes. I wish she'd come out of it and not be an invalid. Mary prayed to God and wiped the tears that involuntarily rolled from her eyes. A year passed. Kevin finally recovered, and despite his fierce resistance, Maria divorced him, leaving him no chance for reconciliation. While she was taking care of Kevin and bringing him to the hospital, Maria got to know Paul better. Between them, a spark flared up, which ignited into a big blazing fire. When Kevin learned that his ex-wife had a romantic relationship with his friend, he was shocked. To say that he was upset is not to say anything. For a week he drank and came to his senses, and now he changes girls like gloves, justifying his behavior by the fact that his beloved wife left him and went to his friend, with whom he ate from the same plate as a child and drank from the same mug. True, Kevin has become more discerning and does not throw himself at the first girl he meets, without finding out her plans for the future. At first he looks at her for a few days, and then throws himself into the relationship, as in a maelstrom with his head. Sophia Paul met his friend. Kevin takes his son for a full day on Saturdays, and they have a great time together. They go for a walk, ride the merry, go round, buy pizza and cotton candy. Kevin does not forget to remind John that his mom did a very bad thing.